Hello everyone, welcome to Kirkcudbright. We're just about to leave. We've got over half a knot of water already travelling under our keel.
If you watch this, see if it goes slack. Yeah. Okay, that's time now then.
Just look at the ebb passing the boat here. It looks like we're already underway.
Okay, jump on. Yeah.
All our lines are free, so I put her in ahead. And then I realise I've got no steering. I've left it locked from the night before, but I shouldn't panic.
Still have the steering locked on. The steering wheel. We're not going to rip that, are we?
Just here I realise the bow won't come out at all. The river ebb's got us pushed hard against the pontoon.
We're pinned to the pontoon. It's alright, just bring the rope in. I'll let us go backwards a little bit and then I'll give it a blast on it. What? No, I'll give it a blast on the bow for us then.
You need to make sure at this point you don't drift backwards while you're getting the bow out. So we're still in gear, forwards with just over tick over on. It does take half a dozen blows on the bow thruster to get the bow out. It would have been pretty long pushing on a pole for Lisa to get us out there, so this has definitely made life easier. As soon as the current grabs us, you can see the speed that the bow's coming round. Now it's actually quite a narrow bit of river here, so you want to stay over by the pontoon. So I stick her in astern and bring the revs up to keep us close to the pontoon and the boat, rather than going over the other side where it's shallow. And not forgetting that it's an ebb tide, in other words the river's draining out, and as the river's draining out it means if you touch the bottom you'll be staying there until the tide comes back in and lifts you off again. So we don't want to go over where that mud bank is at all. So staying over by the pontoon is definitely what we need to do, and that's what we're going to do. Towards the end of the pontoon you can just see the first green can coming up for us to head towards. Well, all these corners aren't sharp turns, they're all nice neat bends or rounds if you like, and that's the way you're to treat them and not chop them off. The buoyage is really good though. You can follow it down, and well, we followed it in quite easy and we'll follow it out quite easy, but you've got to stay on with the buoyage because I don't think there's much water either side of it. Well, this is how crazy the buoyage looks on the chart, and obviously we're going to start off here by the town off the pontoon. We immediately rounded to port on the first bend. The land sticks out on our starboard just here, and on the chart that's just here. As you're going out with the ebb as well, you move over the ground quite quickly. The water's flat like in a river and it's easy to see the buoyage, and you need to keep your eye on it because you can drift a little bit to port or starboard, so you need to check behind you and ahead of you at the same time. When you can see the buildings on the land there, you're going to more or less head for them. You're going to stay within the buoyage, but at least you know you're on the right track when you're going towards the buildings on the land. And that means you're coming up to this corner here, so you're going to have to turn to port. As we approach this northwest bank, the corner that we're going to get to, it's going to be rounded as usual like all the other corners. We're not going to look for a sharp angle change, we're just going to sweep it and stay within the buoyage. This is now going to take us from one bank, the northwest bank, to the southeast bank on the other side, and we're going to have to go over some shallows, or probably the shallowest area that's on the whole of the chart, which is just here. And we're at half tide on a falling tide, so I think we've got plenty of water when I look at the figures. Now I feel when you've passed this particular point where it shallows out, just coming up in front of us now, you can see rocks sticking out on our left hand side there, so you've got to pay attention to what you're doing. And the ground I think is a bit scabby underneath us. Well, I just waved my hand then and it was to tell you that we had just less than 3 meters. Well, just less than 3 meters is actually plenty of water for us, so I think a lot of boats could be quite happy at half tide here. After you've passed that little outcrop of rocks and gone over the shallow bit, you get a little bit more water, and ahead of us in the dark shadow on the other bank there's a lifeboat hut Well, you're heading fairly close towards the lifeboat hut, but there is still some buoyage just before it, and that'll be the end of the buoyage. You can just see it coming into view now. Now, you can think that the tide would take us out to sea at the moment because we're ebbing, but it's actually the other way. It was pulling us inland a bit, so we're in a little bit of a back eddy here. So I think what you need to watch out for is slippage either way, out to sea or into land, and make sure you stay in the track marked out or the channel marked out. And this is the appropriate time for Lisa to pass me a nice cup of tea, I think. There you go, one nice cup of tea. Well, 4 buoys to go. We've got a port and starboard here, and I'm just going through the gate, and then we round that nicely, and that's the lifeboat hut just on the land that you can see, the lifeboat launch station. And we round this one, and then we head off looking at the island. This is us passing the lifeboat launching hut, and this is what the ground looks like next to us. Well, at this point you need to be moving out away from the rocks. The island ahead, called Little Ross, has leading marks on it, so you've got to get them in line as quick as possible, and they'll protect you from them rocks. They're the 2 leading marks. If you look, it's like a lighthouse with a lighthouse, and you're supposed to get over to starboard and line them up, and then follow that line out into the deeper water. So that's quite an easy system to do. See, the bottom one is now lined up with the top one, and that gives you your transit line. Well, we're in deeper water now, so we can pay no attention to that anymore as we slip out the gap in the middle there and make our way into the Solway Firth. That's Gypsy Point hiding over there, and I think we can see a boat coming in along Gypsy Point now. Obviously he's coming and we're going. I've nearly finished my bacon butty. We've got a lovely wake, we've got light airs, the motor's off. I don't think we've actually got much of a rush today, so we were just taking it easy with a bit of a reef in the foresail. When I say taking it easy, we're only doing 4 knots, and we could do a little bit better than that. I'm sure we could, especially with 9 to 10 knots of wind nearly up our chuff. But we've only got 20 miles to do, and we've got all day to do it, so no one's rushing round here. I think I'll finish my breakfast before I put the rest of the sail out. The weather forecast today is 3 to 5 with slight waters. Slight waters we like. 3 to 5 we like. But we're getting about a 2 to 3 at the moment, which is still really nice, because it's pushing us through the water at 4 knots more or less. And if we can do 4 knots for 20 miles, it's only 5 hours, and that'll go quick enough. And Mr. Sunshine is said to be coming out at some point. I know he doesn't look like at the moment in these Mr. Grey skies, but Mr. Blue's out there too. He just got to show his face. Well, that's where we're going, somewhere over there. I think that's the Isle of Man, that little bumpy bit somewhere over there. And this is where we're coming from, somewhere over there. Well, that's Scotland, or the last of Scotland as it disappears down into the Solway Firth. And that's the big, vast Solway Firth there for us to cross. And then that, the other side of it, over there, just coming into view. Well, that's Cumbria. Well, it's been about 2 hours since we departed now. And the first hour was lost more or less to just getting out that estuary. After we got out of there, we put an hour's sailing in more or less, and we're a fifth of the way across, but the wind's gone really light, so the speed slowed down. But we're not going to bother with the motor, we're just going to put our position on the chart. Look at this fella peeking at us in the water there after we've passed. Cheeky devil. To tell you the truth, I didn't see him. I was doing my char fix, and we must have sailed on right by him, and he must have popped up have a look afterwards to have a look to see who we were. Now I hope, or I think, it would have been a seal. Maybe I don't pay enough attention when we're not going quickly. I seem to look for big things and never little things, and I must admit I don't see many fish jumping out the water to say hello to me, and I don't know what that's all about either. They're possibly camera shy. Anyway, all the canvas is out, and we're making as much as we can make, without of course going to the cruise and shoot, which hasn't had an outing for quite a bit of time. But I've thought about putting the cruise and shoot up, because the weather's starting to look a bit nicer. But then I think the forecast is a 3 to 5 and the wind can change quite quickly, so I couldn't be bothered with that. So I'll just sit on what I've got because I ain't in a rush. It's nearly midday and there's a bit of blue sky popping up there, and you can see the silver twinkles of the sunshine on the water. So the day's feeling a nicer day, and there's shadows on the boat, so everything's changing all around us. Well, that's a nice change. It's a change for the better, and it's quite warm, to tell you the truth, as well. It's got to be about 16 degrees, which feels really nice coming up to midday or lunchtime. We've still got a fair distance to go though, 15 miles, and we've got a little bit of wind and a very small amount of through the water speed, but we're over 2.5 knots, and I'm still not worried because we've got hours and hours and hours of daylight left, and the sun is getting up, and it's becoming a much nicer day to be out sailing. My courtesy flag, my courtesy flag, I'll have to remember to take that devil down now. 3 hours in, not even halfway, yeah? Well, speed through the water's picking up, so a little bit more wind on our beam, which is nice. We're starting to make a tiny little bit of white water now as we slip through, but more to the point is we'll be covering ground a bit quicker, and with lovely sunshine to boot and decent temperatures and no rain, and this is just getting better and better as the day goes on. Well, the water's looking nicer, it's getting more bluey looking to it. Boat's still sitting bolt upright, not got enough wind in its sails. Speed's dropped a knot. We've still got 9 knots of wind. 12 miles-ish to go, so we're getting there. That's just past halfway, isn't it, as the trip goes? And it's only 1 o'clock. We're doing more than 4 through the water, so we must have got our tide calculations right, which is a Brucey bonus, isn't it? And it's nice to see Scotland in our wake now and Cumbria ahead of us, right in the middle of a lovely blue Solway Firth. Well, 1300 hours, 4 hours in. Best stick another fix on the chart and see what it looks like. There we go. I think we've broke the back of this one. We're definitely on the way to Whitehaven now. And we've got slightly more wind at the moment, and the speed keeps popping up to 5 knots every now and then, which is really good, considering that the distance is getting covered quite quickly. There you go, about 7 miles to go. 8.8 knots, 4.5 knots through the water. That's all screaming along if you ask me. And there's our 1400 fix, nearly there. This extra little bit of a breeze that we've got now is making Swallow feel a lot more excited going through the water. And me, of course. I love it when she's pushing her way through it, especially when the day looks so nice. The sea, it's a very, very slight sea. Hardly anything on it, and hardly any wind on it when you look at it. But we seem to be making enough now to make Swallow feel exciting to sail. I'm sorry to say it, but there you go. Scotland is very much in our wake now, and we won't be travelling back there for a little bit, I think. A couple of little chasey waves chasing us along, but nothing at all really. And beautiful blue skies, and a nice silent wake as our ladder jumps in and out of the water while she plays. Up ahead we can clearly see Cumbria, that landmass that you can see sticking out called BZ. BZ is sort of the corner at the top of the Solway Firth, opening up into the Irish Sea. And that's the Irish Sea. And out there you've got the Isle of Man hiding somewhere. You could probably see him with a good pair of binoculars because the day's nice and clear. Just when you think you've got a bit of a breeze, it starts to die back down again. Well, we can sit on this for a little bit longer. We're still doing over 3 knots through the water, which is quite a pace when you haven't got that far to go, I suppose. And we can see with our eyeballs where we're going now, and we can see that we're still making our way along. And if I zoom in and freshen that up, if you look along the coastline there, you can actually see the marina there, those dark walls. Well, 3 o'clock's arrived. We've got 2.5 miles to go, which is probably about 40-45 minutes if we keep this pace up, as we're down to less than 6 knots of wind and just under 3 knots over the ground. But there's my 3 o'clock fix, and you can see how close we are. We're virtually there. Well, considering where we've come from, with virtually no wind. St. BZ standing very proud in the distance there as the gateway into the Irish Sea from the Solway Firth, and the marina just on our nose. Well, I suppose we'd best start getting ourselves ready for going into land. And if you were to follow where these bubbles go, they go all the way back to where we come from, Kirkcudbright. Right, so that's our journey nearly done. We best start thinking about getting fenders out, putting some shoes on, and maybe getting some sails down. I have to call the marina up first and make sure we've got a berth, but I'm quite sure there's plenty of berths in there. I've zoomed in, we're a mile out. You can clearly see the way in though, no problems whatsoever. Well, half a mile away, we stick the sails away. Get ready for going in. Best call up now and make sure there's a berth for us. Whitehaven Marina is basically made up in 2 halves. There's the outside half that you can get into virtually any state of the tide. And there's a nice little beach in there that you can dry out should you have a drying out boat as well, which is out the way of everybody else. I'll show you that later. But all you got to do is get yourself between these 2 great big massive walls, and I suppose if there's a bit of a sea and it doesn't have any north in it, it should fall quite flat in here, I should hope, so you can sort yourself out before having to go in the loch. But if there's north in it, I should imagine the wave might carry into here and it mightn't be too pleasant just inside either. But you've got to go straight through the outer harbour and into the loch, and if you call him up beforehand, he'll hopefully have it open for you to be able to slip into. Now, entrance into the loch here is 4 hours either side of high water, so there's a lot of time you can get in and out of this marina, even though it is gated with a loch, and I don't like locks, they scare me, and the bigger the loch the more they scare me. I feel like it's putting a shoe in a shoebox. It doesn't make me too comfortable. One of the things I dislike about locks is you get like eddies inside them, and if you got a long keel and an eddy gets you, it turns you quite quickly if you're sitting right in the eddy. So you've really got to be on your toes going in. Don't worry about any of that, just get it tied on and the time comes. Don't know where. Can you hook one?
Oh, did you have to get out to do yours?
I did. It's because the gap had gone. Because the water was funny in the loch. That's why I thought it might have been better just amidships. When you're securely into the loch, then the dockmaster starts the flood going and you're starting to rise. He then takes the time to lower you down. Some details in a little pocket. It includes your berth and location and also how to get there, which is very handy so that when you leave here, you know where you're going. It takes a couple of minutes to say the least to fill the loch, probably up to 10. And this is a good time to get your fenders sorted while your crew chat and chill. Well, there's a chirpy little siren that goes off when they're going to open the gate, and it's to stop people hopefully walking across the bridge and dropping into the water in the middle. But I don't suppose he'd open it if there was anyone on it anyway. And as the gates open up, then you get to see the marina. The flow's obviously stopped more or less by them, but you still get an odd back eddy or two, so I would wait as long as possible before letting the lines go.
and normally let the bow go before the stern so the bow can pay off a little bit. Well, Lisa's tied the bow line, so I put on a slip for her, save her going ashore, and then we let things go and disappear. Luckily, the berth we've been given is directly ahead of us, so we don't really have to do anything besides motor out of the lock straight over to the berth. If you can see that red Isle of Man flag flying there, it's showing that the wind will push us off the berth. Well, that's not the best for mooring, but it's the best for hanging on the berth because it'll make it comfortable, which it is. And this is what it looks like when we get inside. They're the offices up there. That's the town up there. And this is the marina. From my wobbly hand. And that looks like a great big water slide, but it's not, so I'm not sure what it is. And there's a funny little observation or sitting place there where you can take your flask and have a cup of tea. But the wall's much nicer over there, as I'll show you in a second. This is the next day. It's still nice and sunny, and we went for a walk round. And this is what the loch looks like from above. This was from the wall, looking over the outer harbour. And as you can see, there's a nice beach in the outer harbour, and it's good firm sand as well, and boats use it for anti-fouling. Well, this side here definitely dries out, and it definitely goes to a lot of sand, so you can run aground in the harbour if you want to. Now there's water still in the entrance there all the way up to the loch, and I think there's 1.4 metres at low water springs, but that might vary, so don't quote me on it. And that's Scotland over the Solway Firth in the distance. And this is a storm a-brewing at the end of a lovely day. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our trip across the Solway Firth from Kirkcudbright to Whitehaven. Well, as usual, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you all again soon. So from us here in Whitehaven, bon voyage.